President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has presented the 2024 budget estimate of 27.5 trillion to the joint session of the National Assembly yesterday, Wednesday, November the 29th, 2023. Christened the budget of renewed hope, Mr. President said it will ensure macroeconomic stability, poverty reduction, greater access to social security, amongst others. He highlighted priority areas such as security, local job creation, macroeconomic stability, investment environment optimization, human capital development, poverty reduction, and social security. President Tinubu, during his first budget presentation before the joint section of the National Assembly, said public-private partnership will be explored to fund the budget. He also charged both arms of the legislative to work assiduously and conclude with reasonable dispatch their deliberations on the 2024 budget. Highlighting the components of the 2024 budget proposal, he said after careful review of developments in the world oil market and domestic condition, he adopted a conservative price benchmark of $77.96 per barrel and a daily oil production estimate of 1.78 million barrels per day. He also adopted a 750 naira to dollar exchange rate for the budget. In the budget of 27.5 trillion, non-debt recurrent expenditure is put at 9.92 trillion, while debt service is projected to be 8.25 trillion, and capital expenditure is 8.7 trillion naira. Well, after presentation of the budget, diverse reactions has come to greet it, with some in belief of its ability to push the economy, if implemented, to the later, while others feel some sectors should have been given more funds than it is in the budget. But the big question on the big story for today, should there be hope in the renewed hope budget? And will this budget, if well implemented, truly turn things around? Well, this and more as it concerns the 2024 budget proposal is what this edition of the big story is all about, and that is highlight of the 287.5 trillion naira 2024 budget as presented by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, and that's what we're having as a major discourse today on the big story, and seems to be the biggest news as it concerns the country as of today. And we're talking about highlights of the 27.5 trillion naira budget of the 2024 budget rather. Well, anyway, to help us talk about this, remember we had him on Monday, and we also made that promise that when the budget is finally being released, we'll still drag him down to the studios to help us highlight some of the major and critical sectors, especially embedded in that 2024 budget of 27.5 trillion naira. And I'm talking of our very own economist and social critic, Mr. Gideon Gomes. Good morning and welcome back to the studio. I'd rather put it that way, knowing that you joined us in the very first edition of this week. Welcome to it and welcome back to it.
Well, good morning, Mike. Good morning, Mike.
Well, anyway, like we said, and sticking to our promise, we said we'll bring you back, and he stick to his promise of also
laying the
budget yesterday, Wednesday,
yes, around
noon. Now, the budget of 27.5 trillion naira is 26% higher than the 2023 budget presented by ex-President Muhammad Buhari in 2022. But just as the 2023 budget, this is also a bit similar, knowing that defense and education seem to always get the lion's share, as it was in 2023. But my question, after I do know when the budget was even being read, I'm not surprised that when I called you, you said you were on and listening to all of it. So after careful analysis, any surprise as it concerns the budget? That's my very first question. And my second follow-up question to that, knowing that you're an economist, do you feel it will really help stabilize the microeconomy? Because that's what he said yesterday, and help reduce poverty. I just really want your keen reaction to this budget. Are you impressed or you have your own reservation as a consultant?
Well, Mike, once more, Nigerians, good morning. I am impressed, but not at that static point.
Okay.
My impression of what Bola Ahmed Tinubu have done is a man who actually has a sense of what he wants to do. The question of if he will get there is different, but he has demonstrated that his 8-point agenda of renewal have been encapsulated in the form of a document called the budget that would determine or drive the direction of his expenditure. But we know also that the budget is not just revenue. It also has to do with expenditure. And you don't spend what you don't have. So we are in a very precarious situation when Nigeria is having a revenue problem that might be able to bring or give back to the expenditures he's trying to appropriate for. So give and take. If the revenues were there and the expenditures as outlined are met, Nigeria will be better.
So you are impressed but not overexcited?
Yeah, I'm not overexcited.
Okay, anyway, I'll be excited to know more about your feelings. So let's dive deep into it now. Okay. And let's come to it. Now, I would rather want us to start with how it's been allocated. Now, recurrent expenditure is put at 9.92 trillion, while debt servicing is projected to go up almost 8.25 trillion. And the capital expenditure in that budget is put at 8.7 trillion. Do you see this balance in the book? Is it balanced? Because why I'm asking this, I'm always good at asking this. Why I'm asking this, if you look at the 21.83 trillion of the 2023 budget, recurrent got about 8.33 trillion, 6 trillion into debt service, and 5.9 trillion for capital expenditure.
Which was abysmal.
Yeah. So let's look at it. Is the books balanced?
Like I said, that's a part I give to him. Making sure that the three trunk of the budget are balanced. Let's stop the trillion because those figures could
even give someone a headache.
30, 31, and 28%.
Okay, you don't put percentage. Let's look at. Okay, yeah.
You just see that it is fair enough.
Recurrent.
Okay. Debt servicing and capital. So for the first time, we are seeing a budget that capital is slightly higher than recurrent, which means.
But recurrent is put at 9.9.
I'm using the word slightly because there are other developmental issues that will happen in the capital dimension. In terms of bilateral, multilateral agreements that will come. If all these are put together, the capital pursuit of the budget or of the fiscal year is going to be higher than the recurrent, which have always been the bane. Now, another sweet side of it is, for the first time in several years, we are having a budget whose outlay is telling us that our debt ceiling is already getting too high, and so something should be done. So you discover that from the word go, the deficit have come down, that he intends to go borrowing over. Yes.
I'd like to really let us look at that in this, because I still want us to remain there. Now, like you said, the budget deficit, in case of those at home, let's quickly bring it to them. Now, the budget deficit is projected at 9.18 trillion, or 3.88% of our GDP. That's what the budget deficit. This, funny enough, I know what you mean, is lower than the 13.78 trillion deficit recorded in the 2023 budget. And we'll still be financed by borrowing, though. Let me explain this. Now, the total borrowing amount for this budget will be 7.84 trillion and 298.4 billion from privatization proceeds. That's why he talked about the PPP. Yes. and 1.05 trillion dropped down on multilateral and bilateral loans secured for specific development projects.
Yeah.
And the federal government is also eyeing 10.45 trillion in tax. We're talking about financing this budget.
Yeah.
And we are expected to get our oil proceeds with the sales of almost 1.78 million barrels per day, put at 750 naira to a dollar. And as an economist, is this economic viable? Is it sensible? Yeah,
Mike,
looking at it, I'm looking at the deficit. I'm confused. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
The fact is, what this budget, like we said previously now, what this budget tried to do is take a holistic look at the Nigeria economy. What are the problems? I've just said here, we have a revenue problem. So the only alternate way to getting revenue is borrowing. That's what the previous was doing. But this one is coming with, instead of borrowing all, let's make a private-public partnership, PPP, and be able to get some of our capital issues resolved through that way. It's also looking at a situation where there could be a drawing down from multilateral agreements.
Yeah, bilateral agreements.
Which also will also go into capital issues. Instead of spending the revenues
that we generate.
So he's actually trying to plan a revenue drive of how to source the money for the budget. So the funding is all this analysis we are trying to give to ensure that all does not come from borrowing, including the fiscal measures, which you are talking about, taxes. It's going to ensure that taxes are there. Then a push up of our export crude oil. Instead of where it is at 1.4 thereabout.
We want to show it up to 1.79.
Push it down. So even 2. I believe that if all the indices, like the budget is saying, security is a key factor. When we come to the sectorial team, we'll say that. But then, if insecurity is actually nip at the boat, and no force majeure is declared on our production, oil production, then we can even hit the 2 million. So, he is just trying to give a package that will ensure that our borrowing is not above the limit. In one of his statements, he has said he desired that our debt to GDP should come down. So I think he has a plan. But remember, this is the plan. The plan is going to be different from the execution, which we will see as it comes.
Now, let's still continue. Do you feel the issue of fuel subsidy removal also reduce our base on borrowing? Because if you look at it, out of the 13.78 trillion that was more of a deficit last year, fuel subsidy took a whooping 4 trillion. So if you add 4 trillion to this 9 trillion, we're almost at the 13 trillion.
I don't want to agree with that. I don't want to agree with you. However, the issue of fuel subsidy, we all agree was a dream. All right? So it cannot be just wiped away. But then, if we go by the product itself, the fuel itself, if we are no longer subsidizing, we are not going to be spending money there. So it is true that indirectly or covertly is affecting the expenditure, and so drawing down the deficit that will have appeared. Because if we have had it as an expenditure item, then it will have added to the expenditure being greater than the revenue. And the deficit will have expanded.
So all you are saying, you feel this is more of a balanced book?
Yes.
Well, anyway, we'll balance it up when we continue on the other side, because we'll now critically look at some of the major sectors that took lion's share of this budget. And when we do so, we'll also greatly look at implementation. You stated it. And implementation is always a key. And not only implementation, but can these revenues really be gotten?
Mike, it's sad that last year's budget, capital releases is still as low as less than 30%. So the books could be as good as they are, but the implementation is going to be key.
Okay, anyway, we'll key into that later, but now we need to quickly go on the break, and when we come back, we'll continue our discussion as we look at the highlight of that very budget that was presented to the joint section of the National Assembly yesterday by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, his very first in his 4 years tenure, and that with the 27.5 trillion truly helped turn around things, knowing that it's the largest budget ever that Nigeria has ever budgeted. Or do you feel skeptical, just like the opposition party, which feel that, well, anyway, they wonder what this will do? But we'll not talk politics, though. Oh, quickly do. We need to get a break.
The amount looks bigger, right?
Yes.
But you know, this budget is actually lesser than last year.
Yeah.
Because as of last year, the dollar was 400 and something. Today, the dollar is well over 700.
So it's far less.
It's far less than last year's budget.
Okay, anyway, we'll talk about that greatly more when we come back, but we need to go on that break and pay our commercials and still remain with our budget, though. That's what we want to do.